Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back to our webinar series sponsored by our good friends over at Site. Sorry for the delay this morning. I put in the time wrong on the webinar starting at 10:45. It's actually 11. Sorry about that. Gave us some extra time to set up though. As a reminder, all the recordings are available at www.esa.org/webinars. The recordings are usually available by the end of the day, along with a copy of the PDF version of the presentation. A reminder that later this week, on Thursday and Friday, we have Envirotech 2020 in its virtual form, since we can't meet in person. So there's 27 presentations over the 2 days with 7 webinars. There's 14 hours of professional development if you need it. And all the sessions are recorded for those that pay to attend, and we've kept the price intentionally low so you can help out ESA and your industry association. So it's $49 for members. Today's webinar is the new world of work, getting our offices back up with the COVID pandemic. We have Sharon Chuck with us from Salopek and Associates. Sorry, I butchered it. I tried hard. And she'll give us a presentation, and Crystal's also with us to answer questions. So I'm just going to swap presenters here and we'll get started. You should have control, Sharon.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
We're good.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. We would like to welcome you to our webinar on Monday morning. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. Before we start, I know we can all relate to how hard we've been pushing technology these days. So if for some reason you get disconnected, please go back to the link and just rejoin us. So just a quick housekeeping note. You saw Crystal on camera there, and she's shut her camera off. We have muted everyone, and I'll be shutting my camera here off shortly as well. And we would ask, as we go through today, that you use the Q&A box to submit all of your questions. So I would like to thank Joe from Environmental Services Association of Alberta for providing the opportunity and the forum to bring us together today to talk about the reopening, relaunching, and rebooting of our organizations, to ask questions, to share our thoughts and insights with what you have been seeing and doing since we were given the green light by the province. If you've been feeling anything like we've been over the last 3 months, it is almost like we've been experiencing an invasion of space aliens. Well, now it's the time to kick them back out into space and to take back our normal. I'm Sharon Kolodachuk, a senior consultant and the consulting services manager with Salopek and Associates. In collaboration with Zoe Zanuck, my colleague and our HR coordinator, who is managing the back end of today's webinar, and Crystal Mackey, a certified NOSC and occupational health and safety expert, we are very happy to have the opportunity to spend the next hour with you, facilitating this important conversation around strategy and approach. So today's agenda: do you really understand where you are right now and where you've been over the past 3 months in order to plan for where you are going? How do we move through all of these different phases now, through door number 1 and door number 2 and door number 3? Just a
Sharon,
quick...
sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Should your PowerPoint be up?
It is up.
Well, we just have video. I just see video of you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
let's try that again.
There we go.
How's that? Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm having my own technology issues on a Monday. So let me just pop back to the screen prior here, guys. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so as I was saying, how do we move through these doors? Door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3 that have been set out for us by the province. So if we just take a moment to pause, every stage in life is not good or bad, it's just different. once we accept how different it is, we are able to adapt and pivot in a way that will surprise us. You are capable of so much more. You just have to be uncomfortable to realize it and trust in the process. So as we go through, we encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. While we realize this is in a webinar format, we want to try and encourage as much conversation and discussion as possible, and all questions are gratefully and graciously received. So just a quick bit about Salopec. We are a team of 20 consultants, and we work across the country supporting mostly small and medium-sized organizations and businesses, and a number of nonprofits with their HR, board governance, and strategy needs. We are the outsourced HR department actually for many organizations, because based on your size, you may not have the requirements for a full-time HR person. We've been around in Alberta. Calgary is our head office location since 2006. And our consultants are designated professionals within the HR world, be them here in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec. So we do service all over the country. And now I'd just like to introduce you to Crystal Mackey. As I mentioned, she is certified through ACSA with her NCSO. She also has received her certifications in OHS from the University of Calgary and her diploma in OHS from New Brunswick. She is a very experienced OHS consultant, having created a number of emergency response plans, which is essentially what we are doing and talking about today. Site-specific safety plans, safety management programs, and policies. She is very familiar with running safety meetings and what that looks like. As we know, there is obligations under occupational health and safety in Alberta, depending on the size of your employee population for what your requirements are. She's also experienced at conducting incident investigations and risk management. Another factor is she has the knowledge and experience to work with different organizations through disability management programs and returning people to work. So join me please in welcoming Crystal today, and she will be more than happy to respond to your questions. So just a little food for thought here from the IDEA Council. So in this era of uncertainty and physical distancing, we have an extraordinary opportunity here to listen and engage with our teams and build a collective resilience of our organizations. So empathy begins with acknowledging how COVID has really changed all of us in both our personal lives and our professional lives. So one of the webinars we've done previously took everybody through this roadmap that you see in front of us. We looked at a number of different scenarios in talking to different organizations on what their considerations would be to help manage through that initial phase when a lot of industries and organizations and businesses were shuttered, and what that looked like. And now that we've come through that, what does it look like as we go through and start looking at what is behind door number one? So research clearly shows that positive and inspiring and empowering leaders do turn out to be great leaders. They are valued by their team, and as a result, they create high-performing teams. Leaders, as we know, are really the agent of change. And one of the most successful inventors of the 20th century in this thought process was Warren Buffett. And I'm sure he has a thing or two that he can continue to teach us as we move forward in time and in space and in work and in life. So I'm going to share with you 10 of his most valuable leadership lessons. Numbers 1, 6, and 9 are my favorites, and it'll be interesting to know what yours are. So number 1 is love what you do. Learn how to communicate effectively is number 2. Number 3, choose your business associates wisely. Number 4, don't micromanage. Number 5, this is where we are right now, plan for the future. Number 6, transparency is highly appreciated. Number 7, patience is a virtue. Manage your time wisely is number 8. Number 9, be prepared to take risks and learn from mistakes. And number 10, treat everyone equally. So behind door number 1, we find analyze to strategize. So during this phase 1 and looking forward into phase 2, we really do want to reflect, to look back, and then to think about how do we move forward? What has happened over this past 3 months within our workplaces? Were you able to go virtual? Did that work? Didn't it work? What did work and what didn't work well? Think about what your minimum threshold for viability is. One of the exercises that we have been working with people on is really looking very deeply and consciously at what do you want to start doing after all of this? What do you want to stop doing that hasn't been working for you or serving you well? What do you want to continue to do that you're doing great at already? Or what are you doing that you maybe just need to change a bit or tweak a bit to make it work a little bit better for you as you consider opening door number 2? So this phase here, this is your recovery, your relaunching and your rebooting phase. It is all about defining new short and long-term strategies. So in other words, how can you as organizations and businesses modify to meet the demands in new ways and find new opportunities to support your customers and encourage them to come back? So let's think about your organization's reboot. What is your unique value proposition? What makes you different? So think about that for a moment and maybe pop your thoughts here into the chat box rather than the question box, and just share that with Zoe so that she can capture some of that for us and we can take a look. So in this new remote world, how do colleague interactions and teams function effectively? Are we going to continue to work remotely? Does that remote work look like working from home, or is that a work from anywhere policy? How are leaders going to re-envision the meaning of work and adjust expectations accordingly? How are they going to continue to manage performance in our remote workforce? As we are all aware, what some of the considerations that are in front of us are, how can we continue to sustain a remote workforce, especially when we are being asked to do that for increasingly longer periods of time? So I'd like you to think about that in terms of going back to that start, stop, continue initiative. So let's move through and talk about what's behind door number 2. So door number 2, this is your real planning phase. Now you've taken that brainstorming, you've gone back, you've conducted that activity, that exercise with your staff of that start, stop, continue, looking at building that level of trust and vulnerability and that real culture of feedback, ongoing feedback in regular time. So we all understand that workplaces will look different. They will feel different. They are being different right now. If you've gone to the dentist lately, you'll have seen that it's a very different process. I can't see you right now, but by show of hands, how many of you have stepped out and gone back to the barber or the hairstylist, and what was that experience like? I've heard a variety of different setups for people. Have you been to a restaurant yet? What was that like for you? So we know that these places that we visit, these workplaces that people are working at, will look different for quite some time to come. So we want to look at our adaptability and our flexibility. That word pivot came out, and it has been used a lot over the last 3 months. We've heard great stories about a number of different manufacturing operations across Canada who have been able to successfully pivot. They've retooled themselves and they've been able to step up to meet the needs during the pandemic for a number of different reasons and a number of different resources. We've heard of young people with their 3D printers, working those printers 24 hours a day, trying to help in creating face shields and the headpieces that hold them, and the little extension bars to keep the straps from your masks from cutting into your ears. So there's some real creativity, some huge innovation that has been happening, and necessity is the mother of invention, as we know. So when we look at this phase 2, this plan to adapt, we need to look at the policies and procedures and practices that we have in place that were pre-COVID, what's going to stay and carry us through as we move through all of this? What are our sick policies looking like? Do we want to continue to have a regular sickness policy as versus a COVID sickness policy or a pandemic-like sickness policy? Is there going to be tiered policies within your organizations now? If that's the case, what does that look like? We understood from the government a couple weeks back now that they are talking with the province at 10 sick days annually legislated under ESA. We'll see what that looks like. Not sure if that will go through or not, but we'll have to keep an eye on those types of things. If that's the case, those 10 sick days, as per our 5 we currently have in Alberta, would potentially be unpaid sick days. So what do you as employers then have to maybe help offset some of those costs? What does that look like for your organization? From home, the remote work world is going to continue, where organizations felt very strongly that before they didn't have that ability. They could not set up to work remotely from home. Many of them have surprised themselves, and they have found great success in this. They found great productivity from their staff. So it has been, in a number of instances, a real win-win. Is it going to look like a combination of where we stagger workforces going back in so that we have shifts of people, where some people continue to work from home for this period of time and others go into the office and then it rotates? There are many considerations, not just even from that physical person distancing side of things, but also when you think about things like elevators. If you're going back into a building where you need to access to an elevator to get to your office space, what does that even look like? We know that physical distancing within the confines of an elevator is very challenging. So to run an elevator more frequently than what it's meant to may cause other types of issues. So it's these trickle-down effects that we have to keep in mind as well. And what is going to make sense? In the world of employment lawyers, they like to use the words reasonable and practicable. So if you think in terms of what is reasonable and try and create your policies and your practice and your protocols in conjunction with that, that will serve you very well. The other piece is to ensure that they are organic, that they're flexible, that they're adaptable, and that as things shift and change going forward here, that you have that ability also to respond and accommodate accordingly. So one of Warren Buffett's points that I shared with you was around communication. That was his point number 2, learn how to communicate effectively. So communicate. I know you've heard it before, but honestly, we can't say it enough. It is such a critical time in human history that transparency and that communication factor is huge. As leaders of your organizations, it's critical that you ensure that communication happens regularly and frequently. It's about maintaining that humanness in our workspaces, in our work environments, whether it be in person or remotely. We need to ensure that we have that connection to each other, that we understand what the left hand and the right hand are doing to create that synergy. Work with your staff to openly discuss what a safe workplace will look like. There are a number of organizations that are undertaking surveys right now about returning to work and people's comfort level in doing so. What does that mean to them? What does it look like? It's very important to have those conversations, not just now, but going into the future. As that part of that conversation is also critically important to share with your employee group what kind of protocols you have put in place, what you are putting in place, what you want to develop, what you need to have there to make sure that you are keeping a safe and healthy workplace at all costs. And lastly, in this, remember your self-care. The tendency over the last 3 months has been this full-on onslaught of just work for those that have had that a privilege and opportunity to continue to work. The sense of downtime or being able to take time away seems to have been eradicated a bit with this need to be present and accounted for all the time. it's been a funny shift that way. So don't forget to practice that self-care. And it looks different for everybody that's out there today, but make sure, put that as a priority in your life. As a healthy individual, be much more adapt, able to not only serve your workers in your workplace, but also those in your life. So really, what aspects of your role are changing as you
Sharon, I think we have a problem with your sound. Can you check? Just bear with us for a second, everyone. I think we're having an internet issue, a technical issue. We're just checking with Sharon to see what's going on her end. So sorry about that. Please bear with us. Sharon's just reconnecting to the webinar, so just give us one minute and we should be back up. Thank you. Sharon, can you check if you're muted?
Yeah, I'm not.
No, you're back.
I'm not.
You're back.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think we can hear you again. Sorry, everyone.
Okay.
We're back. So
Okay.
we'll
Where did you
rewind
get
in
to,
space
Joe?
here. We'll start again. We'll start back a slide or wherever we were at. So
Sorry, so, Joe, where did I drop off?
before this slide,
On the slide before?
yeah, about 2 minutes ago or so.
Okay, goodness sakes. Okay, we'll go back. Back here?
Yeah, near the end of that.
Okay. So the part I was
You were
talking
about you're doing polls, stuff, people doing polls with their staff and stuff like that.
Oh, the surveys. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I remember. So okay.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Thanks for letting me know. Okay.
You're welcome.
So appreciate it. So what I was speaking about was your policies and procedures and practices and the work from home. So the remote work that is going to continue into the future and for some time to come, and how so many organizations have been able to really pivot when they thought that they couldn't change and create that successful remote workforce. So really think about what that looks like. So from there, I talked about communicating. It is critical. It is one of the top 10 valuable leadership lessons from Warren Buffett in learning how to communicate effectively. Communication at this time, going forward, and at all times is essential to how we work and interact with each other. And it's really critical to maintain the humanness in our interactions. Once we lose that, we lose a huge piece of the synergy that brings us all together for that common goal of our organization. So my point was to work together with staff to openly discuss what a safe workplace looks like. What do they consider to be a safe workplace? That is a very critical component right now, not just under occupational health and safety, but just as we go forward and work together. We need to make sure that we're understanding what a safe workplace is, and in getting people's opinions, creating that conversation, creating that dialogue. A number of organizations that we've been talking to, they've been surveying their employee base to see what is going to make them feel comfortable in coming back to work. We know there are going to be for their health.
Hi, Sharon, it's Zoe. We can't seem to hear you again, so I'm just seeing what's going on there, and I'm talking to Joe as well. So just bear with us, everyone. I think there's some internet connection issues.
Zoe, can you maybe have Sharon call the number in the email invite, and she can do the audio through her phone?
Here we go. Joe?
Oh, you're back. Okay, sorry. Sorry, everyone.
I'm so sorry, everybody. I've never had this issue before. Okay, so we'll continue on here. So think about this. Think about what aspects of your world of work are changing as you're planning a return to the workplace for your staff. Is that going to look like staggered teams coming back? Is that going to look like you start off with staff coming back into the office and delivering services virtually? Or does it look like some combination of? You have to look at what's going to work best for you as you move forward through this. So as we move into phase 3 and we open this third door, this is our implementation of our plan. You've now created a really solid plan in responding to all of these different factors. So how do we implement this plan? What kind of time frame are we looking at to do so? How do we align our organization to make sure that so we need to keep that top of mind. Check in regularly and frequently. You want to ensure that the information that you're communicating is accurate and that it's timely. A big piece of all of these different steps in your consideration, though, is ensuring that you're following the OHS guidelines and that you are actively providing any updates as they come to be. We know that the updates from the province have lessened, but people are now trying to put these different factors into place, and they're trying them out. They are testing them, and they're going to have to tweak them. They're going to have to make changes. They're going to have to figure out, what have we started doing that's working now? What have we stopped doing that we were doing before? That's okay. We don't need to do that any longer. What can we continue doing with how we were doing things before? And within the scope of all of this, what can we keep but change a bit to make it work even better now that we have tried a number of different factors? This is the place where you as leaders are going to really, really step up and show that leadership, show that capacity to listen, show that capacity to be able to adapt, to be able to gather the information that you need from all concerned stakeholders, and to really build out a very rich and robust return to the workplace plan with whatever that was going to look like for your organization. It has to meet with your needs. So as the saying below talks about, is staying calm and being flexible in that operating plan. You want to build a plan at this point in time, an emergency response plan that is going to carry you forward, not just through the next few months, but that's going to carry you forward through this year and into next year and so on. This will be a foundational plan that, well, we know for those of you that recall the days of H1N1 a number of years back, there was a big push at that time to develop these emergency response plans and these pandemic response plans. Some of them were developed. I know myself that was involved in developing a very extensive one. It then sat on a shelf and collected a lot of dust. So it needs to be current, it needs to be reflective of your organization, it needs to be reflective of how you want to engage your customers, your high level of customer service that you possibly can. As Joe opened today, you're moving your conference to a virtual platform. That's awesome. Congratulations on that. That's a really huge step that probably even a couple of years ago we really wouldn't have thought of, or we wouldn't have thought that we necessarily would be able to do in the sense that we are now. With this big push to have this remote world of work, this has given us opportunities to explore and try things and poke at things in a different way. So it's given us a lot of new opportunities. So what we've done is we've actually created for you a tools and time bundle. We call it Planning Through COVID and Beyond. It's a template that will help you to build out this particular plan that I've been talking about. It has a start, stop, continue, and change worksheet that you can do as you're entering this phase 2 and really thinking about what does reopening, what does rebooting look like for us? And then using that as you've moved through. You can use it again to test things out. What's working now that we have reopened? How do our customers feel about things? How do our staff feel about things? Use that to develop that action plan and that roadmap that you're going to be able to keep current. Get your staff involved. Get them all involved in this activity to have a much more robust way to look at things. We've also developed an OH&S checklist for you for returning to the workplace during and after COVID. That's going to really help to identify safe work practices for you. And that takes a look at how you want to implement that hierarchy of controls. There are a number of COVID screening assessment tools available around. We've actually put one together and created that also as a consent form. So if you are an organization that has individuals visiting your place of work, they need to understand any associated risks with coming into your workplace and agree to receive, let's say it's from a physiotherapist, treatment from that particular individual. So complete with this tools and time bundle is 1 hour of consulting time with one of our senior consultants to help you with customizing or discussing how to use those tools. And the total of that bundle is $185. So just to show you some samples here. So this is the top part of our planning template. So we have a number of different steps that it will take you through, from developing the planning committee to how to undertake and conduct the start, stop, continue activity, to really looking at that hierarchy of controls as well as part of all of your undertakings, to look at your policies and procedures that you have. What kind of protocols can you develop now that are really going to support that healthy workplace and that confidence in people that you want to ensure that their comfort level is there in coming back to work? This is one of the worksheets here. So what do we start doing? So this would give you an idea. What should we have in place to improve our organization? That's now, that's in a few months, that's into the future. So it will give you all of these tips and activities as to how to approach doing this and how to get together in groups and what that looks like to undertake this activity. And this can be a really great, fun, and engaging activity for staff. It's an open forum, no wrong answers, allows them that opportunity to have a voice. So the OH&S checklist. So returning to the workplace. So we keep hearing about different types of controls that are in place to create safe work practices. So the first stage is elimination and substitution. If it's possible to remove hazards or substitute them by replacing it with something that's a much reduced risk, then that would be the very first phase. But trying to do elimination and substitution as abatement methods is quite difficult and can be very difficult, and it's very, very challenging under COVID because it's such a little tiny enemy that we're facing and we can't see it. So then we're looking at engineering controls and administrative controls, and lastly, PPE or personal protective equipment. So your engineering controls are those things that we've been hearing about and seeing. When you go into the grocery store, you see them. When you go into the hardware store, you see them. So you're seeing barriers go up between cash registers or sneeze shields. You could add on barriers if you work in a cubicle environment to increase the height of the wall within the cubicles. So the engineering controls are those physical things that you're using to isolate that hazard, so to keep it contained within a space. We've heard in the news around the meat packing plants and what they've done, that they've put in these guards in between the workstations, between the workers. And for those workers that don't have that ability to keep a 2-meter distance between them, they're required to wear PPE and face shields to ensure that they are fully protected to the best level that we possibly can to keep everybody safe. So the administrative controls are more those things that I was talking about in that phase 2, in looking at the policies and the procedures, developing your guidelines around what does physical distancing in the workplace look like? What does proper hand hygiene look like? We know that we've had it drilled into us now, but it's maintaining that when we're not in our home environment where it's so much easier just to go to the kitchen or the washroom and wash your hands regularly. So what does that look like? What protocols have organizations then put in place to make sure that these things are happening? What does the work from home look like as we go forward? As I mentioned, staggered shifts, things like this. And then lastly would be personal protective equipment. We've had mixed messages on masks, but now the various officials and doctors are recommending that when we are out in gatherings and in locations where we're going to be exposed or exposing others, that we do wear masks, not so much to protect the other people, but to stop the spread from ourselves to other people. So there's a number of different factors, and Krista will be able to speak to this if you have questions, because there is very much a proper way to use PPE. We know that for the most part, people are using just the small face shields that are being given out now at Tim Hortons, the McDonald's, and different locations like that. So even utilizing those, what does that mean? How does that work for you? And there are very specific requirements that employers have that are incumbent on them to make sure that workers know about this virus and minimizing the spread, to really set that clear policy for what is expected of workers if they get sick or have symptoms, or if there is an exposure at the organization, and really to do everything possible under the circumstances to protect the health and safety of workers and customers by providing what we already talked about, the adequate information, the training, the sanitization and hygiene measures, and PPE where required. Considered having that phased approach when you are recalling workers and working with them to really understand their comfort level. On the other side, staff must really practice that physical distancing by keeping more than 2 meters apart from their coworkers and customers. We know that COVID's going to hang around with us for quite some time to come, so it's being conscientious and courteous around these practices. Continue to follow all of the safe work procedures. If it is unsafe to work, then you need to speak with your supervisor and talk to them about what your concerns are. Because if you're feeling that way, then maybe somebody else is feeling that way as well and just didn't have the courage necessarily to speak up. So make sure you do speak up, but make sure you come with solutions as well. If you are sick, if you are feeling unwell, talk to your supervisor and stay home. The best thing that we can do right now to keep each other safe is to practice good hand hygiene and to stay home if we're unwell. Make sure that you wash your hands regularly, wash your hands frequently before you eat, before you drink anything, before you're touching anything. If you've been in a shared space like an elevator or a washroom or the kitchen area, please bear in mind, keep conscientious around that. So the screening assessment tool, this just takes you through a number of questions. There are different ways to utilize this type of tool. Do you want to use it for your staff, your visitors to your site, clients? How are you going to use it? So really think about what that looks like and what your intended use is. Again, it has to be reasonable and practicable. So think about how it's going to apply within the context of your workplace, and we can help you to adjust it accordingly. And you may need to have a couple of different versions. So you may have a version for staff, and then you may have a version for visitors to your work site. Are you able to automate that and put it online? If you're doing time ticketed entry into a place, or you're booking appointments, again, on a timed basis, are you having your clientele complete this ahead of time before they come? Or are you having them do something when they arrive at your site? So think about all of those various things. Is it necessary to have your staff do this every day all the time? Or can you have them do it the beginning of a week? And as they go through the week, ask them the question, has anything changed since you completed the assessment at the beginning of the week? Because we don't want people burning out and this becoming just a perfunctory exercise where they're not thinking consciously about it anymore. So I'm going to move into questions and open just closing thoughts before we do that. So after we've entered through all of these three doors, with the next one opening and to allow us to leave from the prior one, we need to ensure that we have really refined our vision and defined how we want to move forward to return to normal. How do we inspire creativity and innovation now? How do we continue to drive growth? What are our service offerings going to look like for us in the future? How are we going to define success? It would be very important to get clarity now around what you can and should become as an organization. Now, next, it would be to understand clearly what it really means to return to work so that people, again, feel safe and confident. Talk about what needs to be in place. Talk to employees about their level of comfort. Maybe conduct a survey. Ensure you are communicating regularly and frequently and training staff and all of those visiting your workplace on all of these new protocols. Next, look at technology. We need technology now more than ever. And does that mean that in order to move forward effectively in this new world that you need to upgrade your technology? Or how can you really leverage what we have right now? What makes sense financially as well for us? We need to ensure that we have really defined new ways of interacting. Is that working from home or is it working from anywhere once things start to open up? What policies do we need to have in place to support this and to make sure that we're managing expectations appropriately? How does our technology really need to evolve? Do we have the infrastructure we need to move forward into these potentially uncharted waters? Always keep at the forefront of your mind, though, your vision for your organization, your go forward plan, where you want to be, and what are your differentiators. These really become your value proposition. Have you risk-proofed your organization? That's a big piece these days. So to quote the words of Sir Winston Churchill, never waste a good crisis. Regularly review both your internal and your external environments and do those environmental assessments and impacts. Know where you can escalate or de-escalate and how to mitigate your risks in these situations. And lastly, develop an action plan that is tangible and tactical, and it's going to help you to build your emergency response plan that you can refer to now and in the future. And as I said before, don't leave it on a shelf collecting dust. Try it out, test it, tweak it. Make sure it's organic and make sure that it is highly responsive to the needs of your organization as we continue to move through this. So as Charles Darwin says, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most adaptable to change. So now we're going to open your questions up here and see if we can get to everybody.
Yeah, everyone, thanks Sharon for taking the time and doing that today. Really appreciate it. Sorry everyone again for the technical issues. It is Monday and I guess the internet didn't want to work either. So feel free to type your questions in the question box and take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of you with Sharon and Crystal here to answer questions for you and help you with your reopening of your companies. And I will pop back when questions are done.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, Crystal, hopefully you have unmuted yourself now. This question is for you. What COVID procedures and policies are required for working in the field when there is 2 or 3 people? The company has less than 5 employees.
So what you're looking at for policies and procedures for the field, you just want to make sure that if you can't keep that 6 feet of distance, that you just do a proper hazard assessment to assess those risks. So whether you've decided that you guys are going to be touching a lot of different surfaces, or you're going to be in close contact with people in a room, masks are generally the best course for that. As well as hand washing. A lot of people think that gloves are a requirement, but a lot of people don't actually know how to use gloves properly. And when you go into a hospital setting or a clinic setting, you watch the doctors, they come in, they wash their hands, they put on a pair of gloves, they take the gloves off, they wash their hands again, they leave. So it's assessing what risks and what hazards you guys have as a company, and kind of mitigating those that work for you guys. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Thanks, Crystal. So really to kind of pull what Crystal was saying back around as well, the policies and procedures for people working in the field may be somewhat different in a sense because they may be able to space themselves out quite easily. But they still have that same obligation, depending on the work site that they're on, to also respect the guidelines of perhaps if they're working on another client site, and to respect their guidelines as well, and to really ensure that they're following the physical distancing measures, and that there is the appropriate ability for proper hand hygiene. So if it's not necessarily offered at site, what are you keeping in your vehicle that will allow you to do that? What are you keeping in your own little personal hygiene toolkit that'll keep you safe and healthy? Right, Crystal?
Correct.
Next question. How important is it to include members of the OH&S committee in the return to work plan?
For including committee members, I think that they should be an integrated part of it. You should be including all stakeholders, like a selection of stakeholders. So somebody from management, a worker, a committee member, depending on how big your company is, looking at how you intertwine those and have that open working relationship.
Yeah, it's what we were talking about kind of all the way through, in that having that open dialogue with various parties within your organization is critically important to understanding where people feel safe, where their comfort level is, to ensure that everybody is on that same page, and to afford people the opportunity to put their hand up and say, I'm really not comfortable with this. Can you help me to understand what we really need to do? And to give them that voice. Giving people a voice in being able to develop your plans is going to be really important. And having your OH&S your representative if you're less than 20 people, having your OHS and committee if you're more than 20 people, again, depending on your work sites. Those are critical components in how you're going to develop a plan and implement a plan and communicate a plan and ensure that it's working and checking in and touching base on it. How important is it to document your plan and implement checklists?
Very important. Basic 101, the courts don't necessarily care what happened, they care what's documented. So if you're able to show that you have a plan in place and that you put some thought into it and you've assessed those risks and those hazards, if an OH&S inspector comes on site, they're more likely to work with you if they don't think that it's acceptable. So making sure that you do have it documented. Checklists are those components that allow a worker to make sure that they have everything, that they've thought of different steps, different hazards, different pieces, and then how they're going to mitigate those. So
Checklists are our friend, right, Crystal?
definitely, checklists are our friend. And to be honest with you, if you've been on site and you're doing checklists, the same checklist over and over again, finding different ways to help make those checklists easier, to help make them relevant. I've been on some sites where people just quickly check off on the checklist and don't even check what they're doing. So making sure that you do have those spot checks in place to make sure that they are checking and doing what they've signed off on.
Yeah, absolutely. What is our biggest risk as we plan to return to work? Not planning to plan.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest components, because everybody does different work, right? You're working for different companies, you're doing different things, so it's assessing those risks for the companies and planning for those risks. You probably won't get all of those risks, but at least having a plan in place so that if something does happen, you can come in and help out and correct those risks and mitigate the severity of that hazard.
Yeah. And one of the other biggest risks is, as you put that plan in place, is to not go back and check in on it. It's really critical to make sure that you are touching base with it regularly and frequently. And if that means going back out, so as I mentioned earlier, at the front end, survey your staff. What are they going to be comfortable with? What does that returning to the workplace look like for them? Once you've reopened and relaunched and rebooted things, let's say you're a month or two into it now, go back and check with them again. Don't just put it away and think it's all done and that you can just continue going forward. Check with them again. Things may have changed in their mind, or they may have noticed things that you didn't before. So it's that constant communication again, keeping that transparency, keeping those lines open. Would you agree, Crystal?
Yeah, definitely. It's the communication is the biggest piece, and it's that continuous improvement section. Nobody's manual or program is 110% and the best. It can always grow, it can always improve. And having those communications and having those chats with people allows it to, you'd be amazed at where I get some of my ideas from people going, well, have you ever thought about doing this? Because they're thinking from outside the box, whereas you're looking at something day in, day out is the same.
Yeah. So great question. Next question. Do we have to worry about treating people differently as we return to work? Situations are different. Some employees have children, others don't. It's going to look different, but some may feel we are discriminating. That's a very, very good question. And this again goes to having those conversations, having that dialogue with your employee group and talking about what does returning to the workplace look like for them. If you have individuals that have ongoing childcare situations where they don't have access to childcare yet, then it's important to work with them. What does that look like for them? And see if what kind of flexibility they may have, or what is going to be in their best interest at this point in time. It really is about having those conversations to understand what is going to work with people and what isn't, because the last thing you do want to do is be seen as even if it's a perception of being discriminating. Look at your workforce. Maybe you have to do it in phases as to how you're going to bring people back. There are some organizations bringing back, say, 10 to 25% to start with, then and leaving the rest work remotely. Then they're bringing back another contingent, and some are still working remotely, or they're staggering entry. So some people will work in office for a week and others will work from home still for a week. So really having those conversations with people to understand where they're at right now with their particular needs, and sharing with them where you as an organization are going and moving forward to as well. So keeping that dialogue open all the time. So one of the things I didn't mention is Crystal also knows about ergonomics. So any suggestions for making work safe at home? Are staff expected to undertake a hazard assessment?
The staff should, you can put together a basic hazard assessment for your staff to do at home. But what I think a lot of issues or concerns that some people have are is the ergonomics piece. So when we look at the ergonomics,
Crystal, you froze. Crystal? Hello? Crystal froze.
Yeah, I think we lost Crystal's audio and video.
I think we've lost that as well. Can you hear me, Joe?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'll try and pick up. I am not I'm not an ergonomics person by any means, but if you are going to continue having your staff work from home, we know that this all happens so rapidly that we just had to respond really, really quickly. And those regular things that we may have done kind of got pushed aside in order to try and continue some sense of normalcy and continuity within our business operations. But as we go forward, and if you are looking at creating a remote workforce on a regular basis, then conducting that hazard assessment will be an important factor in understanding how an individual is set up to work from their home office. And there are going to be various ways that you can do that. One of the things Crystal had previously shared with me is you can have your staff take pictures of their work environment. What does their chair look like? What does their desk look like? Do they have the ability to stand up for a while? Can they stand and sit? What do all of these things come together to look like to create a healthy workspace for them at home? So take that all into consideration, but work with them. And if you can't go to their home, which is more than likely you can't, have them take those photos so that you can understand how things are working well for them. Okay, next question. Hopefully Crystal will come back.
hey, I did come back. I
There you are.
apologize.
Oh,
I don't
yay.
know what
Yeah.
happened.
Oh,
My laptop
same
just
thing that
stopped.
not sure. Anyway, I stepped in and I pretended to be you.
I'm sure you did.
I'm going to jump
Awesome.
question. Our field personnel act as general contractors. When we have new services coming onto site, we ask them to complete a daily questionnaire. To simplify the collection of this data, we are able to send this questionnaire to the service providers ahead of time and have them complete the form and then submit it to us at the end of the shift. Or do we need to be collecting them daily? Or is either option accessible? So Crystal, I'm going to make an assumption here that by this questionnaire, they're talking about the health screening questionnaire. And they're asking them to complete that daily. My understanding from all of this is that you need to have that completed ahead of time before you go onto site, because if you're showing or exhibiting any symptoms, everybody needs to know, like it needs to be a known thing ahead of time as to why you can't go on site that particular day.
Yeah, so generally first thing in the morning, a lot of companies when you first come on to site or to a business, they ask you those screening questions right then and there. Because if you ask at the end of the day, it's a little too late, right? If that person had filled out, yeah, well, they had a fever, but you get that form at the end of the day. You know, some people, they need money. they need their paycheck. And so if you collect those first thing in the morning, you guys can assess those risks right then and there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And think of it like going to the dentist's office. You actually have to complete that ahead of time. They need to know before you come in that you're safe to be coming into their workspace. And then once you get there, they're going to ask you again if you're okay to come in that day. So they may have asked you even the day before when they are confirming your appointment time, and then they may ask you again for additional screening measures upon your appointment time. So it's the same type of idea that you need to do that at the front end. We only have time for one more question right now. We're running out of time quickly here. Any update flying from Alberta to British Columbia? What PPE measures are being used at the airport?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I know that masks are one thing that are definitely being used. The Calgary International Airport has now mandated the use of masks. You can't go through, and they're also doing the screenings. So if you can't get on a flight without having done a health assessment screening, isn't that correct?
Yes. And then when you're actually flying, once you get to your location, the last article that I had read from Alberta Health is that they wanted you to self-quarantine. So once you're flying, and that's a little bit of an issue with a lot of companies, flying, driving is not necessarily the same, which I found interesting. So.
Well, you're not going through the airport the same way, so not being exposed at the same level. But one of the other things I would say about this is that sorry guys. One of the other things I would say is that it depends on what location you're traveling to. If you're traveling to a northern community where there's been no incidents of COVID, you have to check to see what their health region is saying about people coming in from other places and if there is any self-isolation requirements upon arrival there. If you're going to a site, then you need to check to see what the site protocols and precautions are as well. And you have to follow those. So I think that is kind of where that all sits right now. Yeah. So take time to look at some of the solutions that the company has come up with for assessing the hazards in the workplace that way, and keep that all in mind. So that's all the time we have for questions. Just in closing, with the incredible volume of information that is available, it can be difficult to synthesize. Oh my goodness, Joe, help me to synthesize. See, it is Monday. Nothing's working right.
Wow.
We're here to help you to do that, to take a look at everything and to bring it into a perspective that is rational, reasonable, and makes sense for you, and to help you with your relaunch strategy. So when you're looking at that, it's important to keep in mind to take a step back, to take a breath, and to really look at the bigger picture and consider options you possibly wouldn't have seen otherwise. We've always known that communication is key. As we venture down this new path, one of my favorite poets, Robert Frost, comes to mind, as many of us will take the path less traveled by right now. But please note, you will not be doing this alone. So we will continue to move through this unprecedented time and to learn so much more about our incredible resilience. We are emerging stronger and more united with each day. So thank you so very much for your time and your questions today. If we haven't made it to your question or you have any other questions, we have our contact information on this slide here. Please feel free to reach out to us. And once again, Joe, thank you so much to you and ESAA for hosting the webinar, and to Crystal for providing her expertise on the OH&S side. Take care, everyone. Stay well and have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sharon and Zoe and Crystal and the entire team at Salopec for doing this today. I think it's very important and valuable for everyone, the information. 100% agreement on the communication side. I think that's extremely important. And I'd also encourage people to, if you are traveling to other provinces, to check with each province's website, everyone's website. I was on a couple for some other reasons looking for information, and they're just as good as Alberta's with information about returning back to work and entering their provinces to do work and vice versa. So thanks again. Just a reminder, the webinar recording will be up later today at isa.org/webinars. You'll find the copy of the presentation there, and in the presentation will be Sharon's contact information. So we'll get that posted as well. And a reminder about Envirotech later this week. If you haven't registered, please do. If you know someone that should, please pass on information. We'd appreciate it. And thank you again to our sponsor site for making these webinars free. Thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe.
Thanks. Bye.